So on this episode, I'm going to be taking you through a tier ranking for the Dominaria United Commanders, and specifically the Dominaria United Commanders from the set. Now, the reason behind that is, well, there are 41 commanders from the actual set itself, and in the the precons, the commander product that came with it, there's like an additional 34, which is like over 70 total. So an absurd amount to actually try to rank and to go through in one episode, with that episode being like 2 hours essentially. So yeah, to simplify things and to make them a bit easier to digest, I'm going to be going through separate tier rankings for, the actual set itself and for the actual, commanders from the precons, etc. Okay? Now, with these rankings, I'm going to take you from the D tier, which is the lowest tier, the weakest tier, up to the C, B, A, and finally to the S tier, the top tier, the most powerful commanders out there. Now, a couple of quick disclaimers with this. So, with these commander tier rankings, I will say these are 100% based off of my own opinions and with some input from Eddie as well. So yeah, if I make any mistakes in this episode, make sure you blame Eddie. It's always Eddie's fault, it's not mine. But yeah, with this being a completely subjective tier ranking, your rankings for these commanders might differ, and that's okay. Also, another thing to consider is that I am a casual player and my playgroup is casual. So this is not going to be, even considering CEDH, competitive tier rankings. This has nothing to do with if commanders were built in CEDH style decks, which again are probably trying to combo off as quickly as possible in many scenarios, then yeah, these rankings might be different. But in this context, it's going to be in a more casual meta. Also, one last thing to note is that these rankings themselves are done within the vacuum of Dominaria United set commanders. So what that means essentially is that these rankings are these commanders in comparison to each other, which essentially means that, okay, yeah, one of the commanders might be an S tier commander in this set, but in comparison to other commanders from another set, they might not make that S tier. But yeah, again, it's in a vacuum, it's within just this set and only in comparison to each other. And actually, okay, one more thing, also within each tier, there is no order. The first commander that I bring up is not necessarily any more or less powerful than the next one I bring up within that same tier. So now with all those parameters set, let's jump into it. So the first commander that is starting off the D tier, again, the lowest tier, is Bortuk Bone Rattle, a 4/4 troll shaman with domain. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, choose target creature card in your graveyard, return the card to the battlefield if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control, otherwise put in your hand. So commanders like this one are incredibly weak because, well, yeah, domain essentially benefits you when you've got access to all 5 colors, because you can, obviously get more basic land types in play. With this one, you are limited to what? Swamps, forests, and okay, sure, wastes as well, right? Yeah, you can't, utilize islands or mountains or forests, so you of course are missing out on those. And also, yeah, this ETB really isn't all that impactful. Again, it does have that cast requirement too, so you can't just, blink this way in one way or another, the Conjurer's Closet, or, get it back with, a supernatural stamina or something like that, and take advantage of that. This is just a very, very, very weak commander, and it becomes even more weak because, again, it's just Golgari and not 5 color with that domain. So yeah, Bortuk Bone Rattle, you fall very flat, and you are most definitely a D tier commander. Speaking of falling flat, and I really am not going to, go through all this domain stuff again and again and again, but yeah, another domain commander, Rada, Coalition Warlord, definitely the weakest Rada we have probably ever seen, a 3/3 elf warrior that costs 2, red and green, domain. When it becomes tapped, another target creature you control gets +X/+X until on a turn where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. Again, very limited on what that can be. And yes, okay, you can get this trigger in multiple ways, okay? It just says becomes tapped. So yes, in combat you can do that, which obviously does put your commander into danger. But of course, there are other ways to potentially tap this commander by giving your commander an ability to tap with, maybe something like a Paradise Mantle or something like that. But still, really not that big of an effect. And of course, again, limited based on, your color identity itself. So again, domain commanders like these are incredibly weak just because inherently you don't have access to everything that you'd like to have access to. So next up, you guessed it, yet another domain commander with Nail Avizoa Aeronaut. It's a 2/4 Elf Scout with flying that says, when it deals counter to a player, look at the top X cards of your library, where X the number of basic land types among lands you control. Put up to one of them on top of your library, the rest of them bottom of your library in a random order. Then if there are 5 or basic land types among lands you control, draw a card. Yeah, never a possibility really for a deck like this. There are certain cards that can make it possible, sure. But yeah, the vast majority of the time, you are not going to be able to get those lands out. So yeah, I mean, yes, you can still get some value out of this by being able to set the top of your library in a way, but it's still, it's a very limited trigger. And again, even more limited because again, your color identity is very limited, and Domain with a limited color identity is simply not good. So finally, and I'm happy to say, this is the last Domain commander that is, a 2-color commander that for whatever reason, again, has Domain. Zar Ojanin, Sign of Efrava, is a 4/4 cat warrior that has Domain. Whenever he becomes tapped, put a +1 counter on each creature you control with toughness less than the number of basic land types among lands you control. Again, that's going to be quite a low number because, again, you are limited in what you can put in your deck. And so, again, I've said this before, I've said it again. Domain with a limited color identity is just not good. So this commander is basically just dead on arrival, just like all the other Domain commanders, all D-tier commanders, and I really don't think there's much debate about that. Moving on though, a non-Domain commander, finally, is Rulik Mon's Warren Chief, a 3/3 with Menace that has, when it attacks the top card of your library, if it's a land card you put on the battlefield tapped, if you didn't put a card on the battlefield this way, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. So yes, Menace is a good form of protection in a way when you're going into combat, but still, just being a 3/3 with Menace, your opponents can, team block this pretty effectively and pretty easily to take it out, and the benefit that you're getting is again kind of a conditional benefit. What would you rather have most of the time? Probably that land off the top of your library in a play to actually ramp you. But if you don't hit that, you don't get that card in your hand or anything. You just, get to look at the top card of your library. It's not a land. You're getting a 1/1 red goblin creature token, which is a nice little reward, but still not really all that impactful. And again, you've got to send your commander out into danger to actually even try this. So at the end of the day, yeah, there are just more effective commanders out there that have much more impactful, triggers and reasons to put them in danger. And yeah, Rulik Mon's not enough benefit for putting yourself in danger. So you are a D-tier commander. Next up, we've got Urg, Spawn of Turg, a star 5 frog beast that says Urg's power is equal to the number of land cards in your graveyard. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card in your graveyard, and by paying black-green sacrifice a land, you gain 2 life. Now, sacrificing a land to gain some life, yes, okay, that is a way that we can build our commander's power if we need to, but we really don't want to always sacrifice lands because, it's a resource that we can utilize, and gaining life really isn't all that big of a benefit from this. If that was instead maybe like draw a card, yeah, that would be a lot more worth it. And that being said, yeah, I mean, there are plenty of ways to get a ton of cards into our graveyard, and lands especially, Evolving Wilds, those kind of lands that can sacrifice themselves, great and cool, we can get our commander's power up there. But again, if our commander doesn't have trample a way to get through, it's going to be hard to get damage through on our opponents. And again, this is just basically like a kind of big, dumb vanilla creature at the end of the day that really needs other things to help it get through. And if it can't get through, or if our opponents deal with our graveyard, if they exile our graveyard, this is pretty useless as a commander. So yeah, for all those reasons, I am so sorry, Urg, but you are a D-tier commander. But joining you in the D tier is Squee, Dubious Monarch, a 2/2 Goblin Noble with haste that has, when it attacks, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. And you may cast Squee, Dubious Monarch from your graveyard by paying 3 in a red and exiling 4 other cards from your graveyard rather than paying its mana cost. So yeah, I mean, this Squee is somewhat similar to the previous ones, being able to be cast from other places, graveyard, apparently not exile with this one. But yeah, you can get this commander back more easily, though again, there's kind of an additional condition on this one. You have to exile 4 other cards from your graveyard, which does make a difference, especially, again, if you want to try to make an infinite combo with this commander. It's a lot harder to do, and definitely not as effective as, previous iterations of Squee. So that is a massive limitation in getting it back, and yeah, I mean, your benefit again for attacking with your 2/2 hasty creature is I get 1/1 red goblin, 1/1, and it's also tapped and attacking, so it might just get taken out. Versus, other goblin lords that can make a lot more goblins. Yeah, Squee just is kind of, between a couple of different, things and not really effective at either one. So this version of Squee is most definitely, in my opinion, again, a D-level commander. But the final commander joining all the others in the D tier is Tori the Avenant. I probably said that completely wrong, my apologies. Fury Rider. Avenant? I don't know. Anyways, Tori is a 3/3 vigilant trampling human knight that says, whenever it attacks, all other attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Other red attacking creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. Untap each other white attacking creature you control. I mean, that's somewhat of a nice benefit. Again, you have to send your commander into danger to do that. And yeah, a little pump is great with +1/+1. Red creatures getting trampled, sure, that's nice, but also untapping white creatures, okay. I mean, there are certain things that you can do with this for sure, but none of it's really all that impressive or not all that powerful. So yeah, overall, I think this commander is just really not all that special, and yeah, definitely not a powerful commander, so worthy of the D tier ranking. But now it's time for us to move up a tier, so not the bottom of the barrel, the D tier, but at the C tier, which is still not quite up to the average commander from this set. Let's start off with Baird. So Baird, Argivian Recruiter, and I'm sure I'm saying that wrong too, my apologies, a 2/2 human soldier that says at the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power greater than its base power, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So basically, all you need to do is either have an Anthem effect in play, or, a way to potentially pump a creature temporarily, or, like a +1/+1 counter will work as well. And as long as you have that, you are going to hit this trigger, essentially. You are going to be able to just keep generating creature tokens. Now, this is a low-to-the-ground commander that you can get up pretty early, and that you can, just get this benefit from without actually having to put it into danger. So it can just sit back and help you build up an army over time. Now, that obviously will take some time, but again, you already are benefiting from, again, +1/+1 counters or, anthems. So yeah, you can eventually make those creatures to be pretty deadly. That being said, still not really all that powerful effect. Not bottom of the barrel, but definitely not, your average commander in this set either. So Baird, you are most definitely a C tier commander. And joining you in the C tier, we've got yet another Boros commander with Astor, Bearer of Blades. Astor is a 4/4 human warrior that says when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal an equipment or vehicle card from among them and put in your hand. For the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. Equipment you control have equip 1, vehicles you control have crew 1. So you can get some immediate value with this commander. Now this is on an ETB, so yeah, I mean you're only getting this trigger once, but you can obviously use and abuse this with blink effects to get it more than once by getting either an equipment or vehicle from the top of the library into your hand. But perhaps more importantly, you can really utilize your equipment and vehicles by, making them easier to equip and also making your vehicles easier to crew. Now this can provide you a good amount of value throughout the game, either again by saving mana on equip costs or also again by being able to crew vehicles more easily. Now, is this the most powerful thing in the world? No, but it's definitely not the weakest either. So Astor, whether you are vehicle tribal or whether, you're, a Voltron deck or equipment tribal or a combination of both, you are a C tier commander. Next up though, we've got Aaron Benalia's Ruin, a 3/3 Phyrexian human with Menace that has pay white/black, tap, sacrifice another creature, put a +1 counter on each creature you control. So again, not a terrible effect, but one that is kind of slow and also, only has, a certain limit on really how powerful that can be. Obviously in these colors, you've got plenty of ways to go wide and make a good amount of tokens, and this can help you benefit from those tokens by sacrificing them and, making your tokens even larger. But again, unless you've got ways to, specifically untap this, you're only going to be able to do that once a turn. It does cost, a decent amount of mana at 2 mana to actually get that effect on top of actually sacrificing another creature. So again, not a terrible commander, but not a great commander either. So at the end of the day, Aaron, you are definitely solidly in the C tier rankings. And joining you in these rankings is the brand new Garna Bloodfist of Keld. Garna is a 4/3 human berserker that says whenever the creature you control dies, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, Garna Bloodfist of Keld deals 1 damage to each opponent. So not a terrible commander by any means. If you are attacking with creatures, your opponents might be a little wary on blocking certain ones because you can get a good amount of value out of them when they attack and die. You get to draw cards. And on the other hand, if you've got creatures dying in other ways without attacking, you get to ping down opponents as well. So once you get things set up and going, this commander can definitely make an impact, but at the end of the day, in comparison to all the other commanders from this set, and again, there are a ton, there are a lot of commanders that are just a notch above this. Or many notches above this too, obviously it's a C tier commander. Next up, oh how the mighty have fallen, because well, the original Tatyova is definitely not a C tier commander, but this Tatyova, Steward of Tides, is. Steward of Tides Tatyova is a 3/3 Merfolk Druid that costs green blue that says land creatures you control have flying. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands, up to 1 target land you control becomes a 3/3 elemental creature with haste, it's still a land. So with this Tatyova, you're not really getting any, actual, landfall benefits until you hit 7 lands. Now, that's really not all that hard in these colors, and you can do it quite quickly, but still, when you're working your way to this, you're getting no value until you get there. And then when you do get there, that value is, well, somewhat lackluster. Okay, making one of your lands into a 3/3 with haste, even a flying 3/3 essentially, not really all that great, and actually it can be detrimental to you in many circumstances. Because now you are opening yourself up to board wipes, in the simplest board wipes, a Wrath of God can just take out a lot of your lands if, again, they are creatures. So this is a chimera that can be quite risky without a huge payoff, and yeah, Tatyova, Steward of Tides, in my opinion, again, you have fallen quite a bit from your previous, Tatyova self, and you are definitely a C tier commander. But joining you in the C tier is also King Darian, and I think that's the 48th? Let me know in the comments below if I'm wrong on that, but yeah, XLVIII. I think that's Roman numerals for 48. Nevertheless, King Darian says, other creatures you control get ++1. By paying 3 green/white, put a +1 counter on King Darian, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token, and by sacrificing King Darian, creature tokens you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So this is a low to the ground commander that, yes, can help you build an army and actually pumps them as well, and can help protect them too when you're ready to sacrifice it to protect them by giving them hexproof and indestructible. That being said, the ability to actually make those soldiers, that is a very mana intensive ability. 3 green/white, that is 5 mana in total. That is a lot to pay for that. Now, yes, Darian also gains a counter, but would I rather have this ability, say, cost 2 less, not get that counter on Darian and just get the soldier, so it just costs, 3 mana to do this? Yeah, I would much rather have that. But unfortunately, that's not the way it is. And if it was, yeah, I could definitely see this Darian being up higher. But with the way this commander is, that's just a very mana intensive ability that is going to be hard to activate a lot throughout the game for a lot of value. So yeah, Darian, at the end of the day, you are a C tier commander. With some small adjustments, you could have been up, but unfortunately, it is what it is. Moving on though, we've got Lagomos Hand of Hatred, a 1/3 human shaman that has at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste, sacrifice to begin the next end step. On top of that, tap, search your library for a card, put it in your hand, then shuffle, activate only if 5 or more creatures died this turn. Now, that is a very reachable amount of creatures dying in a turn, but it is still something that does take a good amount of setup and a good amount of effort to actually get to. Obviously, this commander, helps you get there itself, with at least one of those, but yeah, still, it is going to take some setup to actually get there. Once you do get there, yes, there are some incredibly powerful things that you can do. You can tutor multiple times in a turn. You can, very easily combo off with the right cards if that's the direction you're going with the deck. But yes, at the end of the day, it does take a good amount of setup to actually get to, so I think this commander does have potential, but again, because of that kind of high requirement, this is a C tier commander. Moving on though, let's talk about an Azorius commander with Wrath, Weatherlight, Stalwart. Wrath is back as a 1/3 human wizard for just white-blue that says whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, you may tap 2 untap creatures you control. If you do, draw a card. And by paying 3 white, creature control get ++1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. So like King Darian, this is just a lot of mana to try to sink into an ability. And yeah, the benefit, sure, is nice, giving your creatures ++1. For 5 mana, not good at all. Vigilance is nice, just so you can actually swing with your creatures, and of course, then you could take advantage of those creatures being untapped so you can tap them and draw some cards. Yes, this commander can generate you a good amount of value throughout the game, but still, at the end of the day, you've got to put a lot of resources into actually getting that value, whether again that's mana for that ability, or again if it's tapping multiple creatures to draw some cards, which is also dependent on you casting those instant sorceries when you've got those creatures untapped. So overall, just a commander that even just doesn't quite make it to that middle of the road tier, so at the C tier is where you belong, Wrath, Weatherlight, Stalwart. Next up, another commander that isn't about drawing cards, but about discarding cards. Let's talk about the Raven Man. A 2/1 human wizard for 1 and a black that says, beginning of each end step, if a player discarded a card this turn, create a 1/1 black bird creature token with flying, and this creature can't block. And by paying 3 and a black, tap each opponent discards a card, activate only as a sorcery. So this is the type of commander that is limited in a couple of ways with the way that they actually worded this. It does say at the beginning of each end step if a player discarded a card, so that can be anyone, any player, yes, but a player means that you are only getting this trigger once, because even if every single player, including yourself or all your opponents or whatever, discard cards, at the very most you're getting a single 1/1 Blackbird creature token that does have flying, but it cannot block. So again, without such limitations, this commander definitely had a lot more potential, but with those, well, again, it's just its potential is limited. And so because of that, yeah, definitely a C tier commander that, again, with some small tweaks could have been, B, maybe even A tier commander with, some additions, but yeah, this is definitely a C tier commander. And next up in the C tier commander, a commander that in my opinion is disappointing for a couple of reasons, Rona, Shieldred's Faithful. Rona is a 3/4 human wizard that says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses 1 life, and you can cast it from your graveyard by discarding 2 cards instead of paying its other cost. So this is a commander that you can actually kind of get around commander tax on in a way, though again, it is a decently high cost to do so. You have to pay for the commander's actual cost again of 4, and you have to discard 2 cards, which, yes, there are some ways to take advantage of that, but yes, that also is just a way that in some ways is going to, put you down on cards, put you at a disadvantage. And while the payoff for this commander is decently nice, yeah, this commander is actually not really generating you any value itself. So in my opinion, this commander just kind of falls flat and really isn't all that powerful. And yeah, I think that this commander, or at least I should say Rona itself, I had a lot of high expectations for from this set because, well, the previous one was pretty bad from the original Dominaria, at least in my opinion. But yeah, this Rona, not much better. So again, a C tier commander. Moving on, we've got Ravaz of the Claw, a 3/3 Viashino Warlock that has Menace and tap, add 2 mana in any combination of colors, but this may only cast dragon creature spells. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard, and when you cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard, it gains, when this creature dies, exile it. So this is a decent dragon tribal commander, again, pretty limited on, just 2 colors, but, decent colors for dragons. That being said, aside from just being a mana dork, it does allow you to, get dragons out of your graveyard, which is nice, but also somewhat limiting because if those dragons die, they get exiled, so you no longer have access to them. And in these colors, you also have other ways that you might want to actually, utilize those dragons in a more permanent fashion. So that can kind of play against, maybe mass reanimation spells themselves, which, would get all your dragons back, but if you end up losing them permanently, they're just gone. So this is kind of one of those commanders that's just like almost there. And again, there's a lot of powerful commanders in this set, so it didn't quite even make it to the middle of the road. So yeah, Ravaz of the Claw, you are a C tier commander. But now to round up the C tier, we've got Solkanar the Tainted, a 5/5 elemental demon that costs 2 blue, black, red. It says at the beginning of your end step, choose one that has been chosen, draw a card, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life, Solkanar deals 3 damage up to 1 other target creature or planeswalker, or exile Solkanar then return to the battlefield under an opponent's control. This is a commander that can be taken in a lot of different directions. I mean, you could take this, kind of like a Grixis, group hug way if you really wanted to, just donate your commander to your opponents. And of course, there are ways to, get around actually having to do that. That being said, the choices that this gives you are, yes, nice, but not all that impactful for the potential downside of losing your commander. So because those payoffs aren't bigger, and because if you don't want to lose your commander, you've got to do some, workarounds to ensure that you don't do that consistently, well, yeah, Solkanar the Tainted, you are an interesting commander, but still one that does finish in comparison to all the other commanders in this set in the C tier. But now it's time for us to move out of that C tier and onto the B tier, those middle of the road commanders in this set. We're going to start off with Balmor, Battle Mage Captain. Balmor is a 1/3 bird wizard for just blue-red, and it has flying. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain trample until end of turn. This commander is itself very low to the ground and can benefit a lot of your low to the ground creatures, or again, if you can make a bunch of creature tokens, which there are plenty of ways to do so in these colors, you can get a lot of value out of them. Because even your tiniest creatures, when you have a very explosive turn where you cast a ton of instant sorceries, can hit for a lot. So yeah, perhaps, get a bunch of evasive creatures down, a bunch of low to the ground evasive creatures down early, then just start, spell slinging left and right, maybe some cantrips in there to get even more value to, draw deeper into your deck, to cast more spells, and you can just have a very explosive turn where you hit players for a ton of damage again. And yeah, you can push that damage through even if they have blockers, for an evasive creature that might have flying like this one, you can push damage through because of that trample. So yeah, this commander has a good amount of potential. Again, at the end of the day, not, more so than certain commanders that are above it, but yeah, a good middle of the road commander in this set. Next up, we've got Danitha Benalia's Hope, a 4/4 human knight for 4 and a white that has first strike, vigilance, and lifelink, and it says when it enters the battlefield, you may put an aura equipment card from your hand or graveyard on the battlefield attached to Danitha. So this commander basically can help you cheat on, massive equipment or massive auras, and that has a good amount of potential. It is still kind of a one-trick pony in that way, though, where, yes, at the end of the day, it is still a Voltron commander, and a mono-white Voltron commander at that. On top of that, sure, you can get Eldrazi Conscription onto this commander, for free essentially, save a ton of mana by doing so, but you need to, probably have, some form of haste also, associated with this commander. You need to be able to, get a Swiftfoot Boots attached to this commander as well to get the most out of it, and for you not just become a massive target for all your opponents to try to take out, because, yeah, you can become very threatening, but you need to be able to take opponents out quickly and effectively, and again, with a Voltron commander, that can be very hard to do, especially a mono-white Voltron commander. So for all those reasons, Danitha, yeah, you can do some really spicy things, but you are still a B tier commander. And speaking of spicy, and brutally spicy at that, there's Braid's Arisen Nightmare, a 3/3 nightmare for 1 black. And Braid says at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life, and you draw a card. So this is kind of like a quote-unquote fixed stacks commander that kind of allows your opponents to opt out of that major downside of having to sacrifice something, but if they do, they lose life, and you also get a benefit of drawing a card. So this commander can provide you a lot of value throughout the game and drain your opponents at a decent rate, and yeah, I mean, just a solid middle-of-the-road commander, one that can generally put your opponents into a position where they're not going to want to sacrifice their things, especially in a color that, can make player sacrifice even more, or not even have, the permanent right away. Like, if you Dark Ritual this out, and then you're like, okay, I'll sacrifice my land. That is a, high risk, high reward play, and your opponents won't be able to essentially do that. So you can get a lot of value right away with this, though again, it can be quite risky. So at the end of the day, this version of Braids, again, a, fixed stacks version of Braids, quote unquote, is a B tier commander. Next up, though, we've got Ellis Ilkor, Sadistic Pilgrim, a 2/2 death-touching Phyrexian Core Cleric for white-black. It also has, whenever the creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is kind of like a Blood Artist, or probably more so, like a Zulaport Cutthroat in your command zone, which, yes, is nice. And, it's a part of the puzzle when it comes to, an aristocrat-style strategy, which this can be effective at, but it's not the entire puzzle itself. And, outside of this just being that, Blood Artist or, Zulaport Cutthroat piece, which can drain your opponents out, throughout the game for quite a bit, it's not providing you value in any other way. So it is a solid commander, and there are going to be solid builds around this, especially, again, aristocrat-style builds. But yes, it is a middle-of-the-road commander, especially in comparison to some of the other more powerful commanders in this set. So Ellis Ilkor, welcome to the B tier. Moving on, we have Zur Eternal Schemer, also in the B tier, a 1/4 human wizard with flying that costs white, blue, black, and it has enchantment creatures you control have Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof, and by paying 1 and a white, target non-aura enchantment you control becomes a creature in addition to other types, and has base power and toughness each equal to its mana value. So this commander can essentially animate enchantments, and I'm actually really excited about this one. There's some pretty crazy and off-the-wall things that you can do with it. However, it does require a good amount of setup to do those things. And yes, by turning your enchantments into creatures, you are also potentially putting them at risk, for removal when it comes to wraths. Like a Wrath of God isn't going to hit your enchantments unless they're now creatures, which again, Zur makes them permanently. Also, in another direction you might want to take them, you could take them, you make a God's direction with those enchantment creatures that, might have indestructible as well. Though, keep in mind, there's only so many of those out there right now, but yeah, that could be a different direction that could also be pretty powerful, but again, not quite as powerful as some of the other commanders in this set, and yeah, a B tier commander at the end of the day. Also in the B tier, we've got Namada Prime Evil Warden, a 3/4 tree folk with reach that costs 2 black-green. It says if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. When you do, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. And by paying a green, you can sacrifice a sapling and it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And by paying 1 in a black, sacrifice 2 saplings, draw a card. So this can actually make you a good amount of creature tokens throughout the game. And it also can deny your opponents of death triggers, which is a good effect that can be pretty solid. Of course, on top of that, you can also utilize this as a sacrifice outlet. So if you're utilizing, aristocrat style effects, you can get a lot of value out of those too. So once you get things set up with this commander, you can really get things going. But yeah, I mean, that first sacrifice ability, just pumping this, that's just okay. I mean, that's probably gonna be used more so just to actually sacrifice it for whatever value you're gonna get from your other permanents. But also, yeah, okay, you can provide some card advantage as well, though that does cost 2 saplings. So yeah, overall, a solid commander, but a solidly middle of the road commander. So Namada, you are in the B tier. Next up, we've got Queen Alanal of Ruadak, and I probably butchered that whole thing, my apologies, but yeah, Queen Alanal is a star elf noble that has power and toughness equal to the number of creatures you control, and on top of that, if one or more creature tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus a 1/1 white soldier creature token are created instead. Now, keep in mind, that is a nice effect, but it is held back in a couple of ways. First up, it says 1 or more, meaning that, okay, if I make a massive amount of creatures, I am only getting, 1 creature token out of this. Also, it does specify creature tokens. It does not say, just any kind of a token. It has to be a creature token in order to trigger this. So if you're making food tokens or treasures or, clues, etc., 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 you're not getting any additional value out of those. So there's another limitation. Now, obviously, this commander can still help you develop an army pretty quickly. And yeah, the benefit is that this gets bigger too. It doesn't have trample or anything like that. But yeah, overall, a solid commander, a B tier commander, middle of the road. Again, with some slight adjustments, this could have been a lot more powerful. You have definitely an A tier commander with some slight tweaks. Moving on, let's talk about another uncommon commander with Najal the Storm Runner, a 5/4 freak wizard that costs 2 blue, and a red, and it says you may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. So instant speed sorceries, that's interesting. Also, when it attacks, you may pay 2. If you do, when you cast your next instant sorcery spell this turn, copy it and choose targets for the copy. So a nice additional value by being able to potentially copy a spell you're about to cast. Now you do have to pay for that at 2, and also you do have to send this commander into danger to actually do that. It is a 5/4, so a decent amount of toughness, but still it can definitely get taken out in combat. And again, it doesn't have any kind of evasion on it either. That being said, again, being able to cast sorcery spells at flash speed, at instant speed, can be a very effective thing. So yeah, with all these things taken into account, with being able to potentially double up certain spells, and also being able to cast spells, from instant speed, great. This is a middle of the road commander, one that can provide you a good amount of value throughout the game, but nothing that is, astronomically powerful. Moving on, we've got Urtai Resurrected, a 3/2 with flash that is a Phyrexian human wizard that costs 2 blue-black. When it enters the battlefield, choose up to 1 counter target spell activated ability or triggered ability. Its controller draws a card. Destroy another target creature or planeswalker. Its controller draws a card. So this can be a very disruptive commander, one that can, shut players down from casting certain things, and one that can take out creatures or planeswalkers. And yeah, you of course can use and abuse this, with, other ways to use and abuse ETBs, like, a supernatural stamina if this happens to go away, or, a, blink spell. If something is very simple, as an essence flux can actually make this into a, essentially a counter spell or a destroy target creature spell. That being said, when you are doing those things and disrupting your opponents, you're also giving them something in return. You are allowing them to essentially draw a card whenever that happens. Now, yes, you can take out your own things too for some extra value, but yeah, because this commander can provide your opponents value while also disrupting them, it is a B tier commander. Moving on, we've got Tura Kurenrud Sky Knight, and I'm sure I butchered that, my apologies, a 3/3 human knight for 2 white, blue that has flying, and it says, whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Now, this commander is very similar and reminiscent to, a previous commander, or should I say commanders, that, also make creature tokens when you are casting instant sorcery spells. But yeah, I mean, this one is just, less effective than, other examples out there. This is just making you 1/1 soldiers. There's no, additional keyword. There's no, flying for those soldiers. There's nothing. It's just, a simple 1/1 soldier. So this is a decently expensive commander at 5 mana. Yes, it gives you access to additional color, in comparison to like a Talrand. but again at the price of having weaker creature tokens that this makes. So it is not a bad commander. You can obviously make an army pretty quickly with this, but again, that army is more limited because again, it's just, some 1/1s on the ground. So at the end of the day, with all of these factors in mind, this uncommon commander is definitely a middle of the road commander. Not a weak commander by any means, but nothing exceptional either. Moving on, how about Vohar Valdalian Desecrator, a 1/2 Phyrexian Merfolk Wizard that costs blue-black. It has tap, draw a card, then discard a card. If you discard an instant sorcery card this way, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And by paying 2, you can sacrifice it and you may cast target instant sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that spell be put in your graveyard, exile it instead, activate only as a sorcery. So in a casual meta that is not looking to combo off as quickly as possible, yeah, I mean, this commander can provide you a decent amount of value throughout the game, and also kind of being like a combination of like a Merfolk Looter and a Snapcaster Mage in a way is nice, but again, that is at sorcery speed for that, Snapcaster Mage essentially kind of, part. And again, at higher, levels of play, again, if you're playing really competitive, sure, this commander might be able to, reach a higher tier, but in the casual tier, in a commander deck that's not trying to just combo off as soon as it can, this commander is very simply a solid B tier commander, very middle of the road. But the final of these middle of the road commanders, the final B tier commander, is Soul of Windgrace. It's a 5/4 cat avatar that costs 1 black, red, green, and it says, when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may put a land card from a graveyard on the battlefield tapped under your control. By paying a green, you can discard a land card to gain 3 life. By paying 1 in a red, you can discard a land card to draw a card. And by paying 2 in a black, you can discard a land card and it gains indestructible on a turn, tap it. So there is some flexibility to this commander, and yeah, I mean, you can get those land cards into your own graveyard, but also keep in mind you can utilize your opponent's lands as well in their graveyards. Obviously, this commander can be very impactful with fetch lands, so whether it's an Evolving Wild or actual fetch land, great, you can utilize those. But again, to utilize those, you either need to ETB with this, and these colors aren't necessarily the best at actually, using and abusing ETBs, especially since they don't have access to a lot of blink effects, or basically really any blink effects. But yes, you can still utilize an attack trigger too. You do have to put your commander in danger, but you can protect it as well with its ability. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of things this commander can do. None of them are really all that powerful. So at the end of the day, this is a B tier commander. But now it's time for us to move on to the A tier commanders that are above that middle of the pack, but not quite to the top echelon of commanders in this set. Let's start things off with Ivy Gleeful Spell Thief. Ivy is a 2/1 Flying Fairy Rogue that says whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy Gleeful Spell Thief, you may copy that spell. The copy targets Ivy, and a copy of an aura spell becomes a token. This commander can actually do some really spicy things. I mean, obviously copying auras, whether they're your auras or your opponent's auras, can be great. And of course, you can also copy, well, just regular spells, instant sorceries, especially like cantrips that might target a creature. Those can be very effective and you can get a lot of value. You can also do some really crazy mutate things with this commander as well. So yeah, there's a lot of directions you can take this commander and you can get a ton of value out of it. It's a very powerful commander in certain builds, but still not quite to that top tier. So Ivy, at the end of the day, again, you are a crazy value-centric commander that can do some really exciting and off-the-wall things, but you are an A tier commander, which, again, is nothing to be ashamed of. That is an incredible achievement. But joining you in the A tier is Joda the Unifier, a 5/5 human wizard for Wooburg that says legendary creatures you control get +X/+X for X the number of legendary creatures you control. And on top of that, whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary non-land card with lesser mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost, but the rest of them on your library in a random order. So this commander in a legendary tribal build can pump your creatures a ton, and of course also just provide you with a ton of value with essentially what is basically legendary cascade. So you cast a legendary spell, maybe even a legendary creature to, add another legendary creature to the board, which bumps your creatures further. And of course, you get a legendary cascade essentially into something else, which again might be another legendary creature to add to that amount. It's a very powerful strategy, and there's very powerful legendary creatures out there, but of course, there are also more powerful commanders in this set. So yeah, Joda, at the end of the day, you're a fantastic commander. You're an A tier commander, and you should be very proud of that. Next up, a commander that I think is even more so on the cusp of nearly making it to that S tier. Let's talk about Joyra, Ageless Innovator. Joyra is a 2/3 Human Artificer for blue-red that has tap put 2 Ingenuity counters on Joyra. Then you may put an artifact card with mana value X or less from your hand on the battlefield, where X is the number of Ingenuity counters on Joyra. There are plenty of ways to untap Joyra, so you can keep tapping and getting more counters on, and of course there are other ways to get even more counters on, like, proliferating. So yeah, you can get a ton of Ingenuity counters on this commander quite quickly and keep cheating out bigger and bigger artifacts into play. And I'm sure there are plenty of combo chains that you can utilize with this commander as well. So yeah, a very, very, very spicy, very value-centric artifact commander that, with the right build, I'm sure can go off in absolutely no time. That being said, in my opinion, it just falls just short of that S tier. There are commanders in that S tier that are just above it. So Joyra, you are a very solid A tier commander. And joining you in the A tier is Shieldred the Apocalypse, a 4/5 Phyrexian Praetor with Death Touch that says whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life, and whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. So Shieldred is kind of like an Underworld Dreams to the extreme. You get to punish your opponents for a lot of life loss throughout the game for drawing cards, and of course there are plenty of ways, like Howling Minds and stuff like that, to force players to draw even more cards. And on the other hand, you get to gain life when you're drawing cards too, and when you're gaining life, well, on the opposite side of that, there are ways to punish your opponents for you actually gaining life. So you can drain your opponents quite quickly with this commander and pad your life total an extreme amount to make it really hard to take you out. Being a Praetor, yeah, this is a very powerful commander, a very brutal one, and one that in this set has finished at the A tier level. Next up at the A tier, though, we've got Rith Liberated Primeval, a 5/5 dragon that costs 2 red, green, white, that has flying and ward 2, and other dragons you control have ward 2. So this is fantastic protection for your commander itself and for your other dragons as well. And on top of that, at the beginning of your end step, if a creature, planeswalker, and opponent controlled was dealt excess damage this turn, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. So this is a dragon that can protect your other dragons, and there are plenty of powerful dragons in these colors. And yes, on top of that, you can make even more dragons just by doing what you want to do in a dragon deck. Be aggressive, attack, take out your opponent's creatures by forcing them to block. Yeah, you can do a lot of things with this commander that can help you build a dragon army that is very, very hard to deal with. That being said, there are just other commanders in this set that are more powerful than this one, so Rith Liberated Primeval, you are an A tier commander. Finally though, rounding up the A tier, we've got Shauna Purifying Blade, a 3/3 human warrior with lifelink that says at the beginning of your end step, you may pay X. If you do, draw X cards, and X can't be greater than the amount of life you gained this turn. So even with just this commander dealing damage, again, thanks to that lifelink, if you're able to protect your commander when you do so, or get your commander through, cool. You can pay 3, draw 3 at the end of your turn. That sounds great. But of course, this commander has a lot more potential than that. There are plenty of easy ways to gain a ton of life and plenty of ways to gain life consistently, so this can draw you a ton of cards throughout the game, and only having to pay 1 mana per card to draw is incredible. And of course, in these colors as well, there are other ways to, take advantage of drawing cards and other ways to take advantage of gaining life, so you can get a lot of extra value out of a commander like this with this kind of a deck and a strategy. So a great commander to round out our A tier, a very solid commander, but one that is not quite up to S tier standards. Because at the S tier, we've got the most powerful of all the commanders in the set, and let's start things off with Sten Paranoid Partisan. Sten is a 2/2 human wizard that is very low to the ground at just white-blue, so just 2 mana. When it enters the battlefield, choose a card type other than creature or land. Spells of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. By paying 1 white-blue, exile Sten, and return to the battlefield under its owner's control to begin the next end step. Now, yes, you can choose a wide variety of spell choices. You can choose a decent amount of card types. You can choose Planeswalker. You can choose Enchantment. You can choose Instant. You can choose Sorcery. But the reason this commander is an S tier commander, and the reason it can be so broken, is because you can choose Artifact. And reducing the cost of artifacts can lead to some incredibly powerful plays, in some incredibly broken plays, and even some turn 1 wins with this commander, which actually on the quick take that I've done this commander, I illustrated how this commander can win on turn 1. Yeah, cost reduction is an incredible thing, especially with artifacts. And this commander on top of that, you can blink it. So if you want to change, the type, great, you can change it to a different card type. But more than likely, you're just going to utilize that to protect your commander. And again, this can protect from not only, target removal, but also board wipes, because it's like a delayed blink effect that brings it back later. So this commander that can easily protect itself can also reduce the cost of your spells and your artifacts. And yeah. There's a reason why reducing the cost of artifacts is so powerful, and a reason why Sten is most definitely an S tier commander. Moving on, another S tier commander, we've got Rada of Urborg. A 3/3 with Vigilance and Ward 2. For whatever reason, this commander has Ward 2. I do not know why this commander needed it. It seemed like that was staple on. Regardless, a zombie wizard that costs 2 white-black. Other zombies you control Vigilance, and whenever another legendary creature you control dies, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary and it's a 2/2 black zombie that shoots other colors and types. So this commander had a lot of ways that it could have been limited, but essentially Wizards, it seems like, went out of their way to not only limit this commander, but also to make it more powerful. Again, just slapping Ward 2 on this is a great way to protect it. It also gives your zombies Vigilance, which you're going to make zombie versions of your legendary creatures. And of course, the most important part of this is probably that, the token that you're making of it is not legendary. For whatever reason, they put that on there too. They didn't have to, but they did. And so because of that, yeah, if you've got ways to get your legendary creatures back that did die, you can keep them both in play. And having multiple copies of certain legendary creatures in play can be brutal. And of course, a commander like this can really take advantage of, ETBs and death triggers. And yeah, there are plenty of broken, brutal things that you can do with this. And also keep in mind, yeah, with those token copies of your legendaries that, aren't legendary, populate effects. Populate effects get incredible with this to get more and more copies of certain legendary creatures in play. I mean, just imagine the possibilities with something like Teysa Karlov. So yeah, Rada, for many reasons, you are an S tier commander. But now we have gotten to the last commander in the entire set, the last S tier commander at that, with Maria, Scholar of Antiquity. A 3/3 elf artificer that costs 1 red-green that says tap and untap non-token artifact you control, add green. And on top of that, tap 2 and tap non-token artifacts you control, exile the top card of your library, you may play it this turn. So this commander I like to call basically, Urza Jr. This is essentially, not Urza level, okay? Urza doesn't, specify non-token. Urza lets you tap any of your artifacts, including your tokens, which it gives you a token for blue. This one essentially is like, hey, you can only use non-tokens, but you get to make green. And on top of that, you also utilize your artifacts for temporary card advantage. And of course, like Urza, yeah, you can utilize a ton of, low cost or even zero cost artifacts, which there are a lot of those out there. And they essentially are in this deck basically like, Mox Sapphires, basically. So yeah, being able to have essentially a ton of Mox Sapphires, which is a ban card for a reason, in your deck, yeah, has a ton of potential, especially when you can also utilize those artifacts to generate you a ton of value. There are also plenty of ways to take advantage of those artifacts, coming into play or, being tapped for other reasons. And yes, there's just a lot of spicy things that you can do with this commander. And being able to just be even compared to Urza in the same sentence as Urza makes it so this commander is definitely deserving of the title of an S tier commander. But that's it. That is the entire tier ranking for these set commanders. And yeah, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on my rankings. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? I'd love to hear from you. So yeah, let me know in the comments below. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one.
This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.